hailed the role of the Forum of China-Africa Cooperation in promoting China-Africa ties, globalization and multinationalism. Addressing the opening ceremony of the Beijing Summit on FOCAC, AU Chairman Paul Kagame has said that the FOCAC mechanism reflects on the consensus between China and Africa in the building a community with a shared future. According to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the forum can also be regarded as an embodiment of the UN's major priorities.
For South-South cooperation focused on the tangible improvement of the quality of lives of the people of Africa. The progress, the relationship that we have forged through FOCAC is premised on the fundamental and inalienable right of the African people to determine their own future.
Africa's wish is to be a full and integral part of the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm happy to inform you that the reformed African Union will serve as a more effective focal point going forward. Africa is not a zero-sum game.
Together, China and Africa can unite their combined potential for peaceful, durable, equitable progress to the benefit of the whole humankind. It is important that current and future development cooperation contributes to peace, security, and to building a community of shared future for humankind.
All right, and it brings us to 17 minutes to 8 o'clock. And a quick reintroduction of the panel that we have this morning. We have Barak Muluka, Professor Peter Kagwanja, and Professor Wajakoya. Let me start with you, Barak, on China charming Africa. Your thoughts on that and whether it is, China, for instance, if we look at Kenya, they've already built some of the roads that we are doing. And there are those who feel that economically we could be getting ourselves into more trouble with China.
I think any cooperation that improves the quality of life of given people is a welcome cooperation, including the cooperation that Africa is trying to carve out with China. What needs to be done is for it to be properly audited, for it to be properly costed, so that we are sure that what we are doing is cost effective. We have heard that at times we have had to pay 2-3 times what some of these projects are, both here in Kenya and elsewhere in Africa. That is something that requires to be addressed. We are talking at a time when we are seeing that they have pledged up to about 60 billion worth of US dollars to come to Africa. Again, this is likely to come in through the vein of borrowing, and it adds up to what we started this discussion with, that we are talking about international debt, and the repayment will come into the picture at some point. We must ask ourselves whether the funds that are coming in are doing what they are intended to do, or whether they are being stolen by some few individuals and the rest of the population, both born and those who are unborn, being asked to come up to pay for that. So the first of it, I think, a good thing. And then finally, I think that increasingly as we go out to bring in these monies, we need a master plan, a blueprint that shows us that this is how the projects that we put in place are going to build upon one another for overall improved quality of life, rather than a piecemeal assignment here, another piecemeal assignment there, without proper coherence.
All right, Professor Kagwanja, we now have up to, there was a survey that was done recently, and we have more than 40 companies, Chinese companies in Kenya that have set up shop to manufacture. Have we let their head in, but they've come in literally fully with their body? Are there opportunities that possibly they're exploring that we ourselves would be better off exploring and would make more money out of it?
How an economy operates, those are details. I think at this level, given the time we have, I think we would better off stay with the larger picture. And the larger picture is the following. One, that China, as the emerging power, is giving Africa what America gave Europe 60 years ago, the Marshall Plan. Between 2015 and 2018, China has put on the table 120 billion for Africa's industrialization, infrastructure, trade, and other issues. It is not true that all that money is wrong. It's not true. Half of it is to subsidize the African export to China, because we have been saying there is an imbalance of trade between what China is exporting to Africa and what Africa is exporting to China. And this year, it has put, I think, 35 billion to basically facilitate trade between Africa and China. It has asked its private investors to put $10 billion in order to invest in Africa for the purpose of making these investments pay for themselves. One is not saying that we have an angel in China. What I like about China is the straightforwardness. They say we are not bringing charity to Africa. We are negotiating interests. And I don't want to negotiate interests with one country. I want to negotiate with on the continent, so that if there is something that falls between the cracks, one country or the other will pick. That's why we have the largest gathering ever of the Africans since we started as a people. 53 presidents out of 55 and one prime minister from Congo. The exemption is Swaziland. So you can see how important this forum is for Africa. So Africans are not taking it right, like, oh, this is debt, or we are going to be intruded. This is our Marshall Plan, and we have to seize it. How we deal with it as African people is our challenge, because we can either do what Europe did to recover from the war, or we can squander it through corruption and other seepages and basically, give our children a debt. This is not China's problem. It's our problem.
It's our problem. Professor Ajakoya, your thoughts, and are you comfortable with the arrangement?
I'm not comfortable at all.
Why not?
Having read Sustainable Development, Law in Development, and having been part of the Rio de Janeiro and Stockholm conference, if you look at what's inside the picture, then we will not even be talking. And I'm not trying to undermine my two learned friends here. When it comes to issues of development, the first question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is actually in that development? Why can that conference take place in African soil? We have resources that can make Africa to stand on its own and to make its own development manifesto agenda without any kind of asking for handouts and aid and what have you. And the word I hate is aid. Now, when it comes to multinational corporations,
although like Professor Kagwanja said there, it is not all aid, it is not all alone. There is a correlation and a partnership between Africa and China that is trying to be created.
For example,
but on whose terms?
But no, it's not on whose terms. That's why the forum is there. I was part of the think tank myself, the China-Africa think tank, and we from May we've been negotiating what is in it for us as Africa. I went within the framework of the African Union, IGAD, and regional bodies, and what we were negotiating is what are the priorities that we need to fund, not China alone, but even Africans, because we're funding. I think the main problem we have here is that the African policy towards China is not coherent. We need
Yes,
to,
and
we need to have that.
that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, that we need something comprehensive,
Yes.
Yes.
that we are not doing a few isolated things here and there without a very, and I agree with Professor Kagwanja here that what ultimately happens is going to be defined and determined by ourselves rather than by this offshore partner. Naturally, China has got her own interests here. She cannot come as a full-blown
definitely something
philanthropist
she's looking to get.
who will just come to do good and leave you feeling good. There are no such persons and such countries in the world. It's a question of ourselves, asking ourselves.
So it's us to put the guidelines and
what
the
is
limits
in
of
it,
what
for us.
And
Okay. Professor
Let
Japan.
me ask this question, and maybe my colleagues can help me. We've heard of a lot of issues with Chinese companies. And of course, in Africa today, we have 10,000 Chinese companies. And of course, Germany has got 7,000 Chinese companies in Africa, but that's not the
with
issue.
their own citizens
Yes.
following
Yes.
to
Now,
work as
when
employees.
it comes to Chinese corporations coming into Kenya, who do they insure with? Which companies do they insure with? If they can answer me that question, or if somebody
It
else
is
can
for us. It is for us to say we
I
want
do
you
come
to,
to that.
to
Now,
ensure.
also look at the kind of infrastructure they are coming with. If you look at the bilateral treaties that have been signed during Kibaki's administration, and I'm happy that my friend can shed light on this. How comes that we do not have labor certification for the Chinese workers who came along to come and work here for jobs that could have been done by Kenyans? How comes that we have this issue of roads being built? Like if you go to Thika Highway today, if you look at the bypass and the inroads that are coming in, they have become a danger zone. Where are our Kenyan road engineers to twist to the specifications of our countries? Are we just going to have them coming in here and build because we have signed bilateral?
Mike, I think we are on the same platform, all the three of us, including Wajakoya here, who is kind of posturing as if he has a different opinion. But it's actually
Agreeing with you only in a
agreeing
different
with
way.
us, because the question is what standards are we setting ourselves? And we are telling our development partners from China and elsewhere that these are the standards that you must meet.
adhere to.
And we are also imposing standards upon ourselves.
I think the problem is not China, it's us. I have perused through the Johannesburg 2015 10 points of President Xi Jinping. They reflect what Africans would like to achieve. Now, the 8 points that were adopted yesterday are basically, you can see like it was President Kenyatta writing them because his health, industrialization is top, which is manufacturing, is top on the agenda. And the protection of wildlife or the green development. So the African agenda is reflected in that discussion. But what is not clear for many of us is the frameworks that we are building in Africa to ensure that our interests are safeguarded within the implementation. As you say, I have lived in Ethiopia for a long time and in South Africa and now Kenya as a Kenyan. And I have compared, all that time I've been studying China-Africa relations, and I have compared the reactions. I went to Zambia and Malawi. All the hotels are owned by Chinese. In the big hotels, and most of them would have Chinese personnel. You don't see it in Kenya. Stand up and watch any of the construction areas where the Chinese are involved. You only see 1 or 2 Chinese in helmet, the engineers as it were. Now, my institute this year, my Africa Policy Institute, yesterday night, we sent 6 master students to China as part of as part of what the capacity building, and capacity building was one of the issues. About 20,000 Africans from across the continent are going to China for training. The point here is that there has been this outcry that we don't want Chinese taking over our jobs. But then if you are moving to the new world of technology and you don't have the skills, how do you prevent Chinese from taking over your jobs? You have to do training. So for the 60 billion that was given yesterday, a third of it is actually going to capacity building related activities and trade related.
So are you then saying, Professor Kagwanja, that we should be comfortable that whatever deals our African leaders are making with China then are to our benefit? Or are you saying that the structures and the confines of those agreements we are not sure about? Because that's
No,
where
no,
the worry
The
is.
structures are very clear. I can tell you as a scholar and have gone through this. The structures are clear. The problem we have are the frameworks of implementation of the same back in Africa.
And they say the devil is in the details. So if
It's
the
true.
frameworks are not in place, then that means we are not comfortable yet.
No,
We're
we
not-
are
We're
comfortable.
not home and dry.
China, on its part, has a component within the 60 billion and more, has a component on building legal and other frameworks. You know, funding African countries that want to have the investment environment cleared out. The question is, are the African people themselves willing to clear that environment for investment? If you tell, for example, when building the SGR railway, we said we don't want any cement coming from China. China produces a lot of cement, but we don't want cement coming from China. What happened? Our cement industry grew from what it was that time, two or three companies, to what we have today, almost 10.
All right, Professor
I don't
Ojakwe.
totally agree, share the same sentiments with the professor. Because if you look at we Kenyans who have been in the diaspora and having seen what has happened, including my friend Barack, who was in Leicester for many years, and I didn't know that until recently when I researched you, because I wanted to know where you got very good refined English. You find out that, yes, we do not or we may not have a clear-cut framework. But is this framework open for us to look into it? Or is it some kind of closed-door framework just by a few men and women in the executive who will go perpetualize it and say this is what we need? Have people been involved in participating in this kind of framework, just like what happens in India? In India, you cannot, a government of India or federal government of India cannot come up with a framework without the state being involved and without the people in that state being involved in participation. And you can see what happened in the dam of Kerala when the World Bank was trying to build a dam for the people of Kerala without consulting the people of Kerala. Here we are going into a scenario whereby, as it has been from the beginning, where we just look at something, it is coming, it is ours, we have it. No. We should sit down and find out. We should actually be very cautious, like what Fidel Castro did, and Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, and even the people of South Africa after the apartheid. We cannot just come up and say it's good when you find out that statistics on those roads that have been built by the Chinese. Last year alone, 250 people died on the northern bypass, on Thika Road. The other year, as compared to the previous years, because of the way the roads have been built. I'm sorry to be alone on this one, but I'm opposed to this deal where African leaders are congregating because $60 billion are coming in without Kenyans being asked to participate in the whole
What structures would you want put in place? Because it is not all a total loss with that partnership. But you make it sound like we are losing.
Well, we are not losing absolutely, but we need people participation right from the grassroots. Because we have known that multinational corporations...
But what participation? We have the likes of Professor Kagwanja.
Yeah, but then who participates where?
Let me suggest
can
that...
I speak?
Yeah, please.
Just wind up, because we need to wind up in just a bit. But yeah, your closing remarks.
No. I just need popular participation by everybody. Let's see what's coming on the ground for Kenyans. Let Kenyans come up and speak about it. Look at the counterfeit materials that we are having today. 90% of the counterfeit has come as a result of this development. Nobody wants to point a finger at that. Maybe you can ask the police, you can ask the courts, who are these people being taken in? You saw Matiang'i the other day destroying these machines that are being assembled somewhere within here. Let's look at our security and look at our economic security rather than just saying it is coming in 60 billion, it's good for us. No.
All right, Barack, your closing remarks.
It doesn't matter who we cooperate with. The ultimate onus resides with us. Nobody is forcing us into any arrangement. We are going into these arrangements voluntarily. Nobody has been dragged from Africa kicking and screaming to China to sit around a table and negotiate about $60 billion. We have gone there voluntarily and accepted to be part of and parcel of a multilateral
But
arrangement.
Barack, allow me to just butt in there, because we have gone in there, but it's our leaders who are representing us. And the risk and the danger would be if they're going in there for their self-gain at our expense.
If they're going there for their self-gain at our expense, again, the responsibility to hold them to account resides with us. We are talking about leaders who have not imposed themselves upon us through the barrel of the gun. President Kenyatta, who has gone to Beijing, did not arrive in State House shooting like Charles Taylor or Samuel Doe did in Liberia. He has gotten there through the ballot. And if we said that this is the person we need, we have given him the mandate. The things that they are going to negotiate when we come to the implementation, they will go through Parliament. If that Parliament is going to be influenced by a certain tyranny of numbers to close its eyes, we are responsible for having put there that Parliament. Ultimately, we are responsible. And we need to drop this habit of backpassing and looking for somebody to blame. The blame rests squarely with us. When that 60 billion comes to Africa, different African countries are going to do different things with that money. Some are going to develop, others are going to stagnate even further, some are going to suffer even more theft and graft. It is ultimately upon the country to decide.
All right, your closing remarks, Professor Kagwanja.
Well, I want to make 3 points in closing. The first point is that China, however want to look at it, has put on the African table the equivalent or even more than the Marshall Plan that was given to Western Europe. It's a massive resources that Africa has never seen for a long time. And because of those resources, Africa is attracting very unusual responses. We have now become the darling of the world. Today, within the coming years, we are going to see America building a superhighway from Mombasa. This is what President Kenyatta came with from Washington, among other things. I don't think that would have happened were it not for the fear that China is taking over Africa. And the attention on Africa is good for us. 2, that China is literally promoting Pan-Africanism, which was almost dying, in the sense that Africans are coming together. The question is, what are we thinking about? And can we take over the agenda? And finally, I think at home, Professor Wajakoya, we cannot take all Kenyans and ship them to China to be part of the forum. It would be very interesting to get Kenyans in the ship to go to Beijing to participate in that, so that we have popular participation. There is always delegation. That's the modus operandi in terms of these things. But at home, we need to subject what has been agreed upon to kind of local frameworks and standards and scrutiny. Now, how we do that is upon us as Kenyans to agree. We have agreed that we are not going to tolerate corruption. We are not going to tolerate this seepage of resources. How are we going to live up to that? I think that's really the challenge.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We'll have to wind it up right there. Thank you very much, Professor Peter Kagwanja. We also have Barack Muluka and Professor Wajakoya for joining us this morning on Political Point.